Now let's learn a little bit more about metacognition. Metacognition is the process that allows us to analyze our thinking, to look at writing out a plan to identify appropriate strategies for the task at hand, monitor our performance using those learning strategies, and then evaluating how well those strategies worked for that particular task. Metacognition is the skill that lets us be self-reflective. And this is a skill that we've known has been important for centuries. After all, according to Socrates, the ancient Greek philosopher, an unreflective life is not a life fit for human beings. Metacognitive skills are important because they allow us to analyze our thinking, reflect on our thinking skills, look at and record our thought processes, the learning strategies that we use, and create a plan to monitor and evaluate our learning. It's a way to improve how we learn what we learn. Please watch this video on metacognition in Moodle to learn more about what metacognition is, how it works, and why it's important. So let's talk about the history of metacognition. Metacognition as a term was started by John Flavel in the late 70s, and his focus was on how children learn. He realized that there are basically four parts to metacognition: metacognitive knowledge, experiences, goals and tasks, and action or strategy. So, what gets in the way of our being able to think critically? Well, as Woods says, human reasoning is typically governed not by the methods of reasoning and the goals of truth and understanding, but by processes which are biased in favor of short-term benefit. In other words, what gets in our way of thinking critically? The desire, the push to get to the answer as quickly as possible. Metacognition in action. Metacognition is something that we can enact in our everyday lives through metacognitive regulation. That involves planning and setting goals, which also means selecting the strategies we want to use to achieve those goals. 2, monitoring our learning as we go. And 3, evaluating our performance at the end. So in the next slide, you're going to go through a critical thinking exercise. The next slide is called Creating a Metacognitive Plan, and it gives you instructions on how to complete your own metacognitive plan. Then after that, there are slides to help you develop your plan with questions to ask yourself and strategies that you would be able to use in a variety of settings. You can also refer to Chapter 3 in your textbook for more information on how to create a metacognitive plan by planning, monitoring, and evaluating your performance. So, creating a metacognitive plan. What are the steps? Step 1, identify what it is that you want or you need to learn. For example, let's say I need to analyze a piece of fiction for my American Lit class and explain my analysis in a paper using resources to back up my conclusions. That would be identifying what I need to learn. Step 2, write a goal using the Bloom's taxonomy pyramid. So using that example to continue, if I want to analyze the novel The Scarlet Letter for my American Lit class, and I want to be able to write a research paper explaining my analysis. So that is focusing on the analysis level of Bloom's taxonomy. Step 3, identify all the parts of the assignment. So continuing with this example, I will need to 1, read the novel for comprehension, 2, find credible sources that discuss and analyze the story, 3, summarize those articles, 4, evaluate whether or not I agree with those articles or see the meaning in the story that maybe those articles didn't discuss, and 5, construct an essay using in-text citations and a reference page for those sources. Step 4, outline a plan of action. It might be helpful to pull out your calendar, whether that's on your phone or a physical calendar, just to look at how to break this into chunks on different days at different times so that you have time to read the novel, you have time to gather your research, read those sources, and then put them together into your essay. It's better to be realistic in your time schedule and give yourself small chunks of time instead of saying, I'm going to write the whole paper in one Saturday. All right, so make sure that as you are setting up your plan of action, that you know what the final deadline is for the assignment and you account for as many potential roadblocks as you can. Step 5, note the strategies and resources that are available to help you. Strategies for active learning, reading comprehension, summarizing information, writing research papers, or knowing proper MLA format are all going to be helpful strategies, for example. You may also want to note what resources are available to help you out. Tutors, your professor, your classmates, and librarians, for example. So, what questions can you ask yourself as you develop your plan? This is part of being a reflective or metacognitive thinker. Number 1, why did I choose this particular task? In other words, thinking about why this is important to you. 2, what do I already know that's going to help me with this task? 3, what will my finished product need to look like? 4, what's my first step? 5, how much time do I have to complete this task? And think about that in terms of when the final due date is, and also how much time you have between now and then realistically to devote to just this one task. Step 6, or question 6, am I making sure I tackle the plan in small, manageable amounts of time? Be realistic based on what's going on in your life at this time. 7, am I creating a realistic plan that takes my family and work into account? And 8, have I thought about a plan to study to minimize distractions? Are there other questions you could ask? Absolutely, but these are definitely enough to get you started. So, what strategies can you use to apply the same thing once you're in class? Well, step 1, go to class. Second, pay attention when you're in class, and that means making sure you get enough sleep and having strategies in place to make sure your attention doesn't wander. It's also helpful to take notes by hand. Even if you just write down basic concepts or keywords, it helps keep you physically engaged in the lesson. If your mind does wander, then put that in your notes and fill in the gap later by asking your classmates what you missed or going back to your textbook to fill in any blanks. Anytime you come across something as you're taking notes that you're not clear on, put a question mark or some other note next to it so that you know I need to go back and look at this confusing material again, whether that means checking my textbook, asking a tutor, the professor, or another student in the class. This makes a good way to review and fill in gaps later on. So let's talk about some helpful strategies for writing research papers while we're talking about metacognitive plans and strategies. When at all possible, find a topic that actually interests you. If you're given a choice of topics from your instructor, then pick the topic that seems the most interesting to you. That is going to help you stay engaged in the project over the long term. When you're looking for sources, use your library databases so that you can find scholarly articles. Don't just choose the first article you find, but instead look for articles that really have the strongest connection to the argument that you're trying to make in your paper. Once you have your articles, summarize the articles. It gives you a point of reference later on when it's been a couple of days since you've looked over the articles. It gives you that point of reference for which article was about what. If you find something that you like that's word for word, make sure you put quotation marks around it and go ahead and cite it in your notes. That way you know it's a quote and you don't have to worry about accidentally plagiarizing. Once you've read the research, then you can clarify or formulate your opinion and put it into your thesis statement. Your thesis statement should be one sentence. It's usually at the end of your introductory paragraph, and it shows the reader what your paper is really going to prove. Make sure that every paragraph relates back to and supports your thesis statement. This keeps you from getting off topic, and it helps you build your paragraphs in a logical order that connects the ideas to your overall point. And then finally, try not to shortchange your conclusion. This is kind of your mic drop moment at the end of your paper. It should be so strong that if your reader only read your concluding paragraph, they would still have a strong sense of what your overall argument is. So, Sometimes instead of synthesizing or analyzing information, being toward the top of Bloom's taxonomy pyramid, sometimes we just need to memorize information. We need to remember it. So some helpful strategies for memorization include using flashcards. You can build flashcards physically using note cards or cutting up a sheet of notebook paper, or you can also find many free online flashcard websites where you can build your own electronic flashcards. Mnemonic devices are another fun memorization strategy. This is where things like "Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally" come in. You might remember that from math in middle school. Storytelling, songs, and rhymes are also super helpful. There's a reason we almost all sing the ABC song every time we have to look something up in alphabetical order, right? Everybody still knows their ABCs. And this is something that, especially if you're musically inclined, can really help you recall information. Visual images can also be helpful, especially for more visual learners. So it might be helpful to associate, for example, the name Thomas Edison with a picture of a light bulb. And then finally, Memory Palace. This is a way to kind of think of how to best recall rich information. And that would be, instead of just trying to remember information like a list, instead think of it as building a memory palace in your mind. Lots of different types of information, meanings, and examples. And this is a skill that works really well for very sensory learners. It's a chance to bring in sight, smell, taste, touch into your recollection of a particular concept. So, a few more strategies to help you become a strong metacognitive thinker. After class or after a lecture, go ahead and review your notes. Just 5 to 10 minutes can really make a big difference because it lets you know what you understand and it lets you know what you need to cover some more. If you wrote something down and just 5 minutes after the lecture is over you don't understand what it means, that's important. Go ahead and circle that, put a question mark to it so that you know this is something I need to focus on. I've got the other stuff. Same thing when you read through your textbook. Use what you read in the textbook to add information to your class notes. There's going to be a lot of overlap. If there's anything new or maybe explained in a better way for you in your book, add that to your notes and then it'll be there for you when it's time to prepare for the test. Speaking of, how do you prepare for a test? As you're going through your notes and your textbook, look for keywords, words that pop up repeatedly. A lot of times in your textbook, those words will be in bold, so you know that they're important. As you're taking your test, be mindful of the wording. Watch out for absolutes like all, every, none, always, never, and only, because that can change how you interpret what the correct answer is. If you're reading something that feels complicated, then read slowly. It can be helpful to drag your finger or a pen or pencil under the lines of text as you read so that it helps you physically focus as you're reading. Generally, this is excellent advice. As you're taking a test, don't go back and change an answer unless you realize, oops, I just clicked on the wrong one, or oops, I bubbled in the wrong one. Usually your first instinct really is the best answer. Take your time. It's not a race. It doesn't matter which student finishes first or last. Take however much time you need to answer all of the questions, which means don't skip any questions on a test. You're never going to be penalized for that. Make sure that you at least attempt an answer on all of the questions. If you ever have this happen where your mind just feels like it's gone completely blank on the test, try not to panic. Move on to the next question and then come back to that later. A lot of times something later on in the test may refresh your memory or may help you calm down, and then when you go back to that blank question, you can fill it in with an answer. Make sure you get plenty of rest before you take a test. I know that's easier said than done, but try to be aware of when your test days are so that you can plan as much as possible. And then finally, when it's time to sit down and take that test, Give yourself the grace to sit down and take a deep breath, knowing I am confident, I am smart, I am going to do as well as I can. Don't beat yourself up before you even started. So now let's talk about how to enact your plan. For this assignment this week, you're asked to create your own metacognitive plan. Then, once you've shared that plan and gotten feedback on it, it's time to actually revise it if necessary and act on it so that you can reach the goal that you set for yourself. Remember, as you go, it's important to monitor. Monitor your progress, see how well you're learning the information or completing the task, and evaluate. Once you're done, look back over it and see how well did I follow my plan, how well did I achieve my goals, what could I do differently next time for a better outcome. So, here are some questions to help you monitor your progress with your plan. Am I following the plan? Am I following the directions of the assignment? Do I know what the next step is? Does this match what I had planned? If I'm off track, how can I get back on track? Have I asked my instructor for help? Am I getting enough done in the times that I set for myself to work on this? Is there something I don't understand? Have I asked for help? If so, and am I making sure I don't let distractions throw me off my plan? These are all good questions to help you monitor your progress. Now, how do you evaluate your final outcome? Well, first of all, did that final product turn out like I hoped it would? Is my final work better or worse than I expected? How could I have modified my plan to help me get a better outcome? What strategies could I have used that I didn't? Do I feel like they would have helped? Did I stick to my plan and devote enough time to the project? Or do I need to give it more time in the future? What strategies worked for me this time? Is there anything I feel like was missing or left out? And if the outcome is graded, then did my grade match what I expected to get? Did my grade match what I wanted to get? If not, talk to the instructor and see what could have made it better, what could have helped me achieve the grade that I really wanted. So now let's talk about motivation. Metacognition is great, but it's not the same thing as being motivated to learn or being motivated to complete a task. Motivation requires an open mind. Identify any roadblocks that might come up and remove them if at all possible, or come up with ways to work around them. Identify what skills you're going to learn in the class and make those valuable to yourself. How do you make them valuable? How do you feel motivated to learn that material? Think about how can you use these skills in real life? What benefits will you get from using these skills? Where can I get help if the going gets tough? Can I be brave and tackle tough material? Changing your mindset can help you improve your motivation. So now it's time to complete the Metacognitive Awareness Inventory, MAI. This asks you to think about your own metacognitive processes. What kinds of strategies do you use to assess your learning? Identify your strengths and weaknesses, create learning plans, monitor your progress, and then evaluate the outcome. That concludes the presentation for this week. Here are the sources. Thanks for watching and let us know if you have any questions.